The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're coming to you live from the Warner Center in Woodland Hills, California. This is the home for Autism Live. It is also the home for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We're so thrilled to be here with you on this Thursday morning and coming to you live. I need my glasses. In any case, we're going to be with you live for the next 2 hours. We've got a big show, a lot of things that we want to cover, but I want to let you know that there's nothing more important than what you guys have to say. There were a lot of questions that we didn't get to that came in live yesterday, and unfortunately, I don't want to promise that we can always get to all of them, but we're going to try to, whenever we can today, get back to some of those questions from yesterday and questions from you guys coming in, comments, questions, you know, suggestions, whatever it is that you guys have to write, because this show is meant to be interactive. If you watch this show at all, you know that one of the things that I love to say is that we can do this together if we hold hands, right? Si se puede, we can do this. And that you have a place here where we care and that you can write in and interact with us. That's like job number one for me, is to help you to not feel alone in this, really. So Samantha's going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect, some of the different ways that you can write in, participate, be a part of the conversation. While she does that, I'm going to remind you that our homepage is autism-live.com. That's our website. And it's getting a retool, and it's about to change and be completely unrecognizable, but I think much more effective at helping you to get to the depth and breadth of what we've covered here on the show in the last several years. Make it easier, right? I'm all about that. Like, can we make it easier for the parents, please? In any case, so that's coming. But in the meantime, you still have a functional website, right? I don't want to diss the current website. If you see there's a computer screen there, and if you click on the triangle that's on the computer screen, it starts playing a show. It's either the live show if we're live, or a recently recorded live show. And if you want to go back in time, there's a memo tab in the upper left-hand corner. You click on that. It looks just like, you know, bullet points with a line next to it. If you click on that, it gives you a choice of the 100 most recent shows. So that's a lot of shows. If you want to go further back, you head on over to iTunes or YouTube, or get on your Roku channel and you can go further back than that. It's all free in all those places, right? Very proud of that. In any case, but there are some advantages to being on the homepage, and one of them is that you can use the live feature. It is the series of white boxes that are just to the side of the computer screen. If you put your cursor in the box that says your question, kind of intuitive, right? And you type and hit enter, it shows up here on my screen, and we can have a conversation in that way, and it's completely anonymous. I think that's one of the best things about it, is that, you know, nobody but me can see it. I don't even get to know who you are or where you are in the world, right? So if you don't really want to put your business on the streets, because you can put the question on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and all those other places, you can absolutely do that and get to us too. But if you want to be anonymous, you can do it in that way. Or the other thing that you can do is write to me directly at s.penrod@autism-live.com. Now, for those of you listening on iTunes, I'm going to spell that out, because I've had some people write to me and go, it sounded like you said this. So S as in Sam, dot, which is the period, right? Penrod, which is P as in Peter, E, N as in Nancy, R as in robot, O as in Oscar, D as in dog, at autism. I'm fairly confident that you guys all know how to spell that. And then there is the hyphen or the dash. It's the line in the middle, right? And live is the last part. L as in Lucy, I, V as in Victor, E.com. How's that? Write to me, you can, and that's for when you have longer stuff or you want me to be able to get back to you. Some of it's private. You can always write to me and do that. Okay, we never share your private information because we know it's important to you. I would never do that. Which leads me to my next thing. We always have experts on the show, and oh my gosh, I've got some great experts on the show for you today. But I always like to remind you at the start of the show that I'm not one of them. Please do not mistake me and my strident, confident tone for being an expert. I am an autism mom. I'm a former teacher. I'm somebody who cares passionately. I have been in this arena now for a full 12 years and hosted shows about autism for 9 years. So I've learned a lot along the way, and I do have opinions and I have a lot of passion. I want to help you to get to what you want to get to. And for me, it's all equal and even. The people who are on this journey together, what I refer to as the autism community, it's parents, it's teachers, it's individuals who are on the autism spectrum who have the diagnosis, of course. It is all the people who love them, right? All the family and friends and people around them who love them. To me, I want to help all of you to get to whatever it is that you're trying to get to. And believe me, I get it that it is not one size fits all. I hate it when you go to the store and they have those shirts that say one size fits most. It doesn't really work for me. I'm just saying. And autism is that way too. It's not even one size fits most. So I want to help you to get to the things that you want to get to and answer the questions. So we have the experts, but I'm not one of them. All right? I just care deeply. I'm your cheerleader. I'm the person who's going to mutter nice things about you behind your back. Okay, as long as we're clear about that, it is time, my friends, for something we fondly refer to around here as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym, and we try to figure out what in the heck are they talking about? And why should I care? And why can't they just use plain words, right? So we give you the actual definition, which we promptly make as much fun of as we can manage. And then we give you a working definition, which hopefully helps you to get at least a beginner's idea of what the neighborhood of what this thing is that we're talking about. Frequently, we make the experts break out into hives, but that's just part of the fun, right? Okay, so today's term, and it's an oldie but a goodie, we venture back to this frequently, it's IEP. And I specifically wanted to do this one now because you're starting, if you haven't already, you're about to get an invitation in all likelihood to go to an IEP meeting. It's not like a prom invitation at all, is it? It's that, oh, no, kind of dread. And it doesn't have to be. I have to tell you, the more I feel like as a parent, and listen, I'm a former teacher. I sat on the other side of the table for IEPs. But I feel like as a parent, the more empowered I have become to know what's happening and to be an actual player at the table. Because in the beginning, I was like, I don't know what he needs. Don't ask me because I don't know. And the more I felt like I did know, and I have to be honest, skills is what really empowered me to do that. The less stressful the IEP became. The more I felt like I had a seat at the table, the better it was. And I think the smoother the meetings went and the quicker they went too, because in the beginning they were long. Okay, so what's an IEP for those of you who don't know? An IEP, let's go to, which is Individualized Education Program. Let's go to our actual definition. An IEP is a federally mandated legal document that details education goals for a specific child within the special education scope. Everybody doesn't get an IEP. You have to qualify for an IEP, but if you do qualify for an IEP, it's supposed to be, hear that, an individualized education plan or program. Some states say program. So if a student has been identified as having special education needs, and there are different qualifiers, but autism is one of them, then you get to have an individualized education plan. And isn't that a great thing? That's our actual definition. Not much to make fun of because this is about as serious as things can get, right? But let's move on to our working definition. Our working definition is that it's a written plan to educate a child with special needs that must be followed. Did you see the part on the last one about it's a legal document? Well, here's the thing. There are laws in place that say that every single child in the United States is entitled to a free, appropriate public education. And further, that education must offer a floor of opportunity in which the child can access the curriculum, and that it needs to be done in the least restrictive environment. And there's more to it that says that it must be done in the place where they would have been educated if they did not have the special needs. And I know that part just shocked a lot of you, because many of you are putting your kids on buses and sending them far, far away because you were told that the homeschool did not have the program. Each year, I try to add like one more phrase from the language of the legalese around IEPs for myself to understand and to convey to you guys. But it does say in there that they have to be offered things in the location appropriate, that free appropriate public education in the location where they would have been educated had they not had this special need. I think a lot of schools take advantage of the fact that families don't know that, and we need to stop that. And sometimes parents, we make a choice that we would rather put them on a bus for an hour every day to go to the school where we know that the child is going to be well taken care of, instead of trying to force something down a school's throat that they don't know how to do. And, you know, I think that's a completely reasonable choice for a parent to make faced with those two alternatives. If you have to be in a school that doesn't know how to educate your child and you're trying to get them to know how to do it, oh my gosh, that's an uphill climb, right? Whereas a bus ride and you have people who already know how to do it, if you're choosing to do that, please know that I support you in that knowledgeable choice. I just think that sometimes parents are just doing it and don't know that there was a choice, right? So in any case, it's IEP season. Some of you may have IEPs in the fall, but most of us have them in the spring, because that all has to get done by the end of the school year. There needs to be assigned IEP, and the pressure is on. It's not just on the parents, it's on the educators and the administration, because the administration is tasked with getting all of their IEPs done in a very short period of time. You probably are being asked right now, or you may have been asked in the last month about testing, and asked to sign a piece of paper saying that your child can be tested on a variety of different things. They have to give you paperwork, what it is. You can make exclusions. You can say, no, you don't get to do this, but there are consequences that come with that, right? But we all need to be getting ready in some way for the IEP. So now is a great time of year, and I'm really going to be pushing you guys for the next few weeks to think about, to fantasize for a moment about next year. And if you could accomplish anything next year at school with your child, what would it be? What would it look like? What would you like to have in place? Because it starts with wishing and fantasizing, right? And then we move into, okay, what would that look like? And what would the concrete goals be? It's possible, you guys. But if we don't have it, you know that whole thing, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I almost never can get that right, but I got it right. So this is the plan, and that everybody's going to function off of, and it's a legal plan. And they have to follow it. And if they don't, it's actionable. And that's never fun. If you have to file due process because they're just file non-compliance with the IEP, it's never fun, but it's a lot better than just watching your kid flounder. I promise you. I absolutely promise you. So IEP, man, if you have a good, strong, effective, individual IEP in place, your kid will make tremendous progress, right? If you don't, it's unlikely that your child will make as much progress. You may luck out and get a great teacher who knows what to do anyway, but having the plan and having people follow it, it's a really good thing to do. IEP. We'll talk more about it, and send in your questions if you have questions. All right, let's move on to our question of the day, because I just got you all hepped up talking about the IEP. So here's your question. How do you deal with anger What do you do to deal with anger? Oh man, it's hard, right? If you get good and angry about something, it can feel helpless and hopeless. So how do you guys deal with anger? Write in and tell us. Let's swap ideas. I have to tell you that the only thing that I have found to be effective in dealing with anger, because sometimes grief and fear can mask as anger. So I'm not talking about necessarily that, but I mean true, when you are like in the anger phase, the only thing that has worked for me is Byron Katie's process that's called the work. We had her on the show once, and I think she's an amazing woman. And it's this process, and honestly, I can sit down and when I will do it, and it's work, but it's like a 5-step process. And when I'm done, I'm in a much better place of understanding and perspective taking, and I understand what my side of the street is, and I almost always intuitively know what the next move is, where I could be completely paralyzed. So I just want to put that out there from me, Byron Katie. She's got, the book that I recommend is Loving What Is. Oh, isn't that a bitter pill to swallow? And a lot of autism parents really love Byron Katie. I think she speaks in a way that we all understand, and you will see that in the book. She talks specifically about an issue that she had with her daughter, that her daughter was a drug addict, and she tried to do a bunch of things, right? She took all the steps. There was action to take. She took it, but it still didn't solve it. And so she had to do some work for herself to be like, okay, if I can only do what I can only do, and then, then what happens? How do I find a way to be able to live with what is? And that's a cute little trick, but she outlines it for you. Okay, so our topic of the week, moving on from our question, because of what we just talked about, is the idea of grief, anger, and fear. And my goodness, there's a lot of that, right? And probably more in the last couple of weeks, I think, for a lot of us who have school-age children, grief, anger, and fear. But for all of us who have kids who are on the autism spectrum, there is grief, anger, and fear. And I think for all people who are on the spectrum, there is grief, anger, and fear. And we need to have a way of embracing those emotions and not saying, oh, well, I just shouldn't be afraid, right? Because that never worked for anybody ever, right? To just say, oh, well, get over it. When somebody's in true grief, fear, or anger, get over it never worked for anybody, right? So having a process to be able to accept what you're feeling and then have movement and not get paralyzed is really key. And I always want to say to you here on the show, you're going to feel these things. You're going to. I mean, there's just no way that you cannot, right? When I see people who are just always happy and whatever, I don't buy it. Because in every life, some rain will fall, right? But I think the people that I'm impressed with are people who find a way to recognize the rain for what it is and find a way to move through it and accept that there are parts of it that are never going to be great, but looking for the silver linings whenever possible. And that I find I want to be with those people and learn at their feet, right? Because they seem to be the people who have the best stomach linings. And I don't know about you, but I want a good stomach lining. I've tried the other. In any case, we're going to have these things. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today too, and some of the things that we can do to mitigate that. But on the show today, we got some great guests for you. I will tell you that we don't have Bonnie Yates today, unfortunately. She's off to the COPA conference. She talks about COPA all the time on the show. And because we aren't going to be doing shows the next 2 Thursdays, we'll have shows on Wednesdays. But I'm out at robotics competitions the next 2 Thursdays. How happy am I about that? I could explode. I'm so happy. But I'll miss you guys on those Thursdays. We'll be here on Wednesdays. But in any case, we don't have Bonnie today, but 2 incredible guests and experts. We're going to be starting out with Lauren Faith. She's a BCBA, a board certified behavior analyst, and she's going to be with us in just a couple of minutes answering questions during our new segment, Ask an Autism Expert. And then a little bit later in the next hour, we have Tom Island. He's been on the show before, but never just he and I together. And this is going to be so much fun for us. Tom is a wonderful, passionate author and advocate. He also was diagnosed with autism as a young teenager. So he is on the spectrum, and he's got some wonderful, exciting things to tell us. And I know you're going to really enjoy hearing from him, his unique perspective on things. He's just really a breath of fresh air. You're going to love Tom. So all that, plus we're going to answer as many of the questions that you guys have sent in. We do have a mindfulness moment that's going to tie into our grief, fear, and anger and anxiety. And then we're going to do a little bit of, hopefully we'll have time for an autism in the classroom moment, but we have a question about autism in the classroom, so that might have to suffice. In any case, we got to take a break. We're running late. And next up is Lauren Faith, BCBA. Stick with us.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. This month we're gonna make some gluten-free Play-Doh. It's a great activity because A, I know a lot of our kids have an allergy to gluten, and B, it's super cheap and cost effective to make your own. So let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are 1 cup of white rice flour, half a cup of cornstarch, half a cup of salt, 1 tablespoon of cream of tartar, 1.5 teaspoons of vegetable oil, 1 cup of water, food coloring, a saucepan, and a spatula. So as you guys can see, I'm in my kitchen because I'm going to be using the stovetop to make the Play-Doh. First what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pot and fill it up with all the dry ingredients, okay? Now that I have my dry ingredients in the saucepan, I'm now going to add the wet ones, the vegetable oil and the water. I'm going to turn the pan onto low heat and continue stirring. What I want to make sure happens is that it gets solidified and gooky looking, you'll see in a second, but not overcooked, okay? You're just trying to get the materials to kind of congeal. You know the dough is ready. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna just take it off the stovetop and let it cool. Once it's cool, then you're gonna add your coloring, and boom, you've got gluten-free Play-Doh. Well, I hope you enjoyed the Play-Doh with your kids. Until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Parent to parent, you've got an IEP meeting coming up and you're asking yourself, how do I prepare for this? Well, there are a couple of things that you can do to ensure that this IEP is going to be less stressful. You're not even going to have to carry the Tums anymore. So the first thing that you're going to do is make sure that all of the discourse that happens between you and the school happens in writing. So even when you let them know that you're going to be attending the meeting, make sure you do it in writing. You can send an email. Lawyers tell us that those count. The next thing that you're going to do in that email where you respond and say, yes, I am coming to the meeting, make sure that you notify the school that you're going to be bringing a tape recorder. You need to do that within 48 hours of the meeting and do it in writing. So why not put it in the email that you're responding that you're going to come? And then make sure that you get on your best behavior because you're going to be as nice as possible during this IEP. Remember, being nice is what gets the job done, even when you're feeling frustrated. And something that you can also do before the IEP meeting is to request that all of the reports for anything that they're wanting to present to you about your child or any testing that they did with your child be given to you in writing 48 hours before the meeting. Not all schools will comply, but if you've asked for it in writing, at least you'll have a record of it. And if you do get those documents, you'll be more prepared than you could ever dream. An IEP doesn't have to be stressful as long as we're prepared. We all want our children to eat healthily. I'm so intrigued watching the picture of my son. It's like I've lost my mind. Are you like that? Do you look at pictures of your kids and it's just like nothing else exists? In any case, we're back. And I have this new segment that I'm just loving, you guys, and I know that you guys are too. It's called Ask an Autism Expert, and every week we're welcoming another person to answer questions that you guys have written in, because we just can't seem to get to all of them, and they really need some expertise sometimes. So joining us right now for the first time in the show is Lauren Faith. She's a board-certified behavior analyst. And Lauren, we're so excited to have you here this morning. Start by telling us a little bit about what you work here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. What do you do?
That's a great question. Yeah, so I am a BCBA. My official title is project manager. So that means I do a lot of miscellaneous things, but I'm really on the clinical level. So I support a lot of our supervisors at CARD, a lot of the BCBAs here. I'm also a regional manager for Central Valley, California. So in that role, my job is to ensure that the offices in that region are matching the clinical standard of CARD, both operationally and obviously with regards to our treatment of our clients.
And Lauren is just fabulous. We're so lucky to have her this morning. And Lauren, I'm going to jump right in because I know you got things to go to afterwards. The first question, somebody wrote in and said, my question is about my son, who is 2 years and 10 months old now. He has been in 40 hours of ABA for a year, and I'm sending a hug to that mom. He has no functional communication. Although he is quite verbal, he loves to sing his alphabets, nursery rhymes, and recently has started to read words. He's a bright kid, but I'm so lost and worried about language acquisition. He can say any word, but constantly requires a prompt. When we try to fade prompts, he just scrolls through the words he knows. Very frustrated that we don't have a single reliable word for requests. He had 2 a few months ago. His scripting has increased over time, and he is very visually distracted, otherwise compliant and sweet. Anyway, we recently started PECS, and he seems to be doing well with the early phrases. I'm not sure if this is the best way to go, considering that we are not making any progress with verbal communication, and please help.
Yes, this is definitely a common challenge that I think a lot of families face. I mean, you said it yourself, giving this mom a hug. I have to commend this mom. This is a young child, and the fact that mom is choosing to do the full intensive early intervention, like that's such a huge piece, and that's such a wonderful choice, because that's such an effective treatment at this age. So, wanted to point that out as well. You also mentioned so much, this child seems to have so many wonderful skills, and there's so many great things, a lot of things that are really indicators of long-term success, which is really awesome as well. So a couple of things to keep in mind, obviously, I'm hearing kind of a simple description. So, my first recommendation is also, you always want to go work with a direct BCBA or professional licensed individual that would actually be able to observe your child and work directly with your child to be able to make very specific recommendations. That's something me as a BCBA, when I'm seeing people, I want to make sure that I'm making recommendations based on what I'm observing and also what I'm hearing as far as feedback. So I wanted to mention that as well. Now, when you're looking at something like functional communication, the first thing you always want to look at if you're feeling frustrated that things are not working is you want to actually look at what you've been doing with regards to teaching those requests, or what we would refer to in the field as a MAND. And so we really want to look at like what is actually happening for that. And so when you look at functional communication training or MAND training, you first want to make sure, are the things that we're really pushing this child to request, are they things that, for example, they're getting free access to outside of the times that we're requiring them to ask for it? So this is something when I'm working with families and I say, okay, let's pick the first 3 things that we're really going to be pushing for a vocal MAND or request. And they'll say, oh, they really like TV, or they really like the certain, Elmo DVD or something like that. And what I want to make sure they understand is this something that you are willing to withhold unless the child asks for it? And so you need to pick something that, is really motivating, but is also something that you're confident that, grandma or dad or someone else is not going to be giving to the child for free, if you will, outside of the times that we're really pushing the child to ask for that. Because kids are smart. They figure out that okay, I know that dad doesn't make me ask for that. So I'm just going to wait mom out because I know that when dad comes home later, he'll be able, he'll give that to me for free and I won't have to ask for it. So that's a big part of what we're looking at when we're looking at functional communication is it done where they don't get free access to this outside of it and therefore they're really motivated for it? And also, have you done a preference assessment? Are these things that the child truly wants, or are we just assuming that the child wants those things? So that's something you really want to look at initially, just to ensure that being done properly. Now, the other thing that you mentioned, Shannon, was this parent reports kind of when they're fading the prompt, and it's really hard. The prompt dependency thing is definitely a valid concern, and it happens for a lot of different kids just because prompts are easier. And so it's sounding like this is maybe a child that struggles with that fading of that prompt. So one thing I wanted to mention that for this parent probably look into is what exactly are we doing to fade the prompt? You mentioned that this parent said this child is actually starting to read some words. So that actually, for kids that actually can read text, that can be a really wonderful prompt that you're able to fade a little bit easier than sometimes using what we would call an echoic or a vocal prompt. So for example, say you are trying to work on the man cookie, okay, as an example. If I'm practicing that skill with a child, I might be able to hold up like a card that says cookie, or even a picture potentially of cookie, and then fade my vocal prompt and be able to show them that visual of either the word cookie or the picture, and then over time coming up with a plan of fading that. So if you have a text, it might be you have a text of the word cookie and you put a line and then a dot under that word, and then eventually you fade the word cookie and you just have that line and the dot, and then eventually you fade the line and it's just a dot. Sometimes for some kids, even that can be a cue of, oh yeah, that's right, I remember we did that before, that's what I need to say. So again, part of it is really looking at the prompting that you're doing and the protocol you have in place to ensure that you're not fading your prompt too quickly or in a way that's not setting the child up for success. I did want to mention, I know mom mentioned in her feedback to you, Shannon, that you guys, that they are using PACS. So PACS is a form of picture or iconic communication. It can be a really effective strategy for a lot of kids. The key with that is again, making sure that we're really following through with what's there. I know the concern that mom mentioned was, is this in the best interest of my child? Is this going to help them establish, communication skills? And, the research that supports picture communication or iconic communication does indicate that it actually does help facilitate the acquisition of vocal speech. There's a lot that can be done when you're using any sort of picture communication or iconic communication, especially in some of those early phases where the person who the child gives the icon or picture to will do that expressive follow-up cookie, so that they're hearing this language and seeing that this is what we do to communicate with each other. So it's really valuable as kind of a solution, especially he's almost 3 years old. We want to make sure that he has a method of functional communication while you're developing the vocal skills. Iconic communication has been shown to help reduce problem behaviors. It's been shown to really be a source of words, and we all know that words are really powerful, and we want everyone to have a form of communicating their thoughts and feelings and desires to other people. So it's definitely a tricky situation, but there's a lot that you can kind of do just by looking initially at, have we really been doing this to the full integrity that it's designed to be?
Love that answer. I'm going to move on to the next one. Okay, the next one, this is a very interesting one. I'm a kindergarten teacher with a 5-year-old that is not diagnosed with autism, but he walks on his toes, flops to the floor, and screams and yells if he's not winning a game, or he doesn't want to do an activity, and will hit and kick you if you try to move him. I give him choices, but he would rather cause a scene. I have to move the rest of my class, 22 kids, away from him, which is difficult in a small classroom. Do you have any ideas on what I can try? And thank you very much. I'm a fan of the show. And I want to love on this teacher for writing in. We're getting more and more teachers writing in. And I also want to point out what I love about this is that people are starting to get it, Lauren, that behavioral ABA and looking at things in a behavioral way isn't just for kids who are on the autism spectrum. We can see challenging behavior from any individual, kindergartner or a senior citizen, and behavioral techniques work. So what can we give this teacher to help her?
Yeah, well, and it's a great point. I mean, I use ABA strategies on my husband all the time. So it is something that can be used across, pretty much anyone. It's just at its core, this is behavior support, essentially. So I wanted to mention, definitely, I am really proud and impressed with this teacher that's kind of going above and beyond for her students and trying to find the support. There are not enough teachers out there that really are seeking out additional resources to support their kids. I think there's so many kids now that whether it's potentially autism or whether it's a different diagnosis or whether they don't have a diagnosis at all, there's a lot of supports that can potentially be put in place in the classroom. I did want to mention also that there's as far as teachers, the Institute for Behavioral Training. When I read this, I immediately thought, Institute for Behavioral Training has an entire series that's actually dedicated to educators that has additional ideas, really out-of-the-box solutions. So that would be a potentially great resource for this teacher or potentially other schools or other teachers possibly listening to this broadcast. So that's something to think about. Now, with this child in particular, anytime we hear of any individual that might be having a behavior of some form, part of my job as a BCBA is to actually really do an assessment to figure out the function of the behavior. And so the function of the behavior is, why is this behavior happening? What is this individual, what are they trying to get out of this? And so it's a little bit tricky based on the information here. There seems to be a lot of different functions at play. So specifically, that this teacher mentions, anytime it's a task they don't want to do, they'll engage in this behavior. So that might indicate that the function is escape. You also mentioned that he seems to like to do it because he likes to get the response from other people. That might indicate an attention function. There was also a mention of any time that things don't seem to go his way, which can allude to potentially another maybe tangible or automatic function. So there's a lot of potential functions here. And so the first thing I definitely would want to recommend is that you're working with your school staff, potentially if you have an on-site BCBA, or a school psychologist that would be able to help you figure out the function. Sometimes a behavior can have multiple functions. Sometimes we have to kind of figure out what is the function that's most frequently occurring, and we kind of have to start with that one. But it is important that we really look at it from a really function-based perspective. So let's say, for example, then once you know the function, let's say, for example, the function is escape. You mentioned that the child does this when they're trying to escape something. They don't want to do it. So then the next thing, once we know the function, we really want to hone in on teaching that child replacement skills for that function that would meet those same needs. So say, for example, this is a child that is engaging in these behaviors anytime you're asking him, hey, we're going to go do this worksheet or we're going to do this assignment now. And then they're engaging in these challenging behaviors. Then we really need to look, if the functions escape, we need to be working on teaching this child to request for a break ahead of the time that the behaviors begin. So it may be something where the teacher has a break card that is on that child's desk, and that's kind of a free, it's a free pass. And initially, it might be something that they miss out on assignments, but if it eliminates or reduces the challenging behavior, that's a good thing. And we can then shape it back by saying, initially we need to make sure every single time that individual uses the break card, that they would be able to get out of the less preferred task. And then once that behavior is going much better and it's reduced, then you can start to fade maybe that reinforcement to every other time. So it's more of a 2-to-1 ratio. And so this is where really working with your school psychologist or someone like that can help you fade that. But again, you really want to look at it from what is the function. So again, each of those other things you need to take into consideration. If it is attention or if it is tangible, we need to figure out what are we going to do to teach that child replacement skills for that. The other thing I wanted to mention, this is effective for a lot of kids, is it doesn't mention anything about a reinforcement system in class. I know choices is a really awesome kind of what we refer to as antecedent. And so antecedent is what are we doing to prevent the occurrence of this behavior. So choices is a really, really great one. Another thing to really look at would be some sort of a token system, reinforcement system, something that really is honing in on what we want this child to do. So if we want the child to comply with instructions when we ask them to, then we need to be putting in place a reinforcement system that specifically targets that appropriate behavior. It needs to be something that the child's really motivated for. And I know in schools, sometimes that can be challenging, but working with the parents, a lot of parents are on board with like, okay, what can I help what can I help do? For a lot of schools, I have multiple students in schools that they're motivated for computer time, or they're motivated to be able to go into the library. There's different things that sometimes are available at school that we can pull in as that reinforcer. And so really looking at what is that child or individual motivated for, and then what is the specific things that we're looking from them to basically get the good response out of that.
Amazing, amazing. And we're keeping you a little bit late because your answers are so great. Are you okay to take time to do the last question? Okay, yeah, awesome. Thank you. So the last question is, why does my son have to be first all the time? First one done, first to line up, first to finish. He's competitive with games as well. It's like he has to win and be first at everything. He's 6 and he's not diagnosed with anything. I love that 2 of your questions are not necessarily about autism.
Yes. And this is also very common. It's funny. So everybody has different personalities, and we always want to be cognizant of that, whether there's a diagnosis or not. We all have our own stuff. So in this situation, this might be an individual where they just have more of a competitive personality. It might also be maybe a child that likes to know what's happening and likes to have a little bit more control over kind of things that are happening. My son is one of those kids. He likes to know what is going to be the outcome. So for this particular child, it might be something where they always want to be first, or they want to always win because in their head, this is how they want it to be set up. And when those expectations aren't met, it's hard to cope with that. They could be either or. So something to consider with these types of kids is really heavily what we refer to as prime, which is like prep them for what to expect. So, okay, we're going to play this game with your friend, and you might win and you might lose. And if you win, here's all the things that you can do. And if you lose, here's also what you can do. So flooding with them with that type of information can be really helpful, just to kind of prep them for what to do. Or hey, we're going to go line up and you might be in front, or your friends might get there first. Again, if you get there first, you can do this. If you don't get there first, you can do that. Giving them that information can be really helpful. The other thing that's really great these days is there's so many books out there that if you just go to Amazon and Google like winning and losing, there's a ton of books out there that it's essentially what we refer to in the field as a social story, which social stories are really designed to just kind of help prep the child for, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is winning. When I win, this is what I can do. It's kind of the same things that you might be able to just tell them, but for some families, it's harder to think of those solutions. And so there's a lot of books out there that really go through that. And that can be a really great strategy for a lot of families. The other thing, depending on if that is or is not effective, again, also looking at some sort of a reinforcement system. So right now for my own son, because he tends to be a little bit rigid about things, we actually have a pom-pom jar in my house where when he is very go with the flow and flexible, he can earn a pom-pom for that. And we have a set rule. He knows that's what it is. And then when the jar is full, he actually we go to Target and we go buy a toy. So that's something that works for my son. But as an example, when you do a system like that, you need to be really specific as to what behavior you're reinforcing, and making sure that the child understands, okay, I earn marbles or I earn stars or whatever it is when I am a flexible thinker, or when I follow rules the first time, or anything like that. And then making sure that they're motivated for whatever it is that they will earn when they earn all of their, their jar is full, or they earn all of their stars.
I love that. Lauren, you're amazing. This is why I love this segment. You're just so articulate and fabulous, and these are all great suggestions. I can't thank you enough. It's been wonderful to have you on the show, and I look forward to sometime having you back on again.
Sounds good. Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you so much. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to be back with more Autism Live. Stick with us.
Nick was diagnosed with autism in 1994 at the age of 4. He received 5 years of therapy from CARD that eventually faded out. Nick recovered from autism in 2001.
This song I'm about to perform is by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. CARD helped many patients, myself, to recover to this level now.
Cheryl and Mike's son, Jack Riley, was diagnosed with autism in 2010 at age 2. He's been receiving therapy from CARD for a year and a half. Today, Cheryl, Mike, and Nick meet for the first time.
I'm curious as to what you remember.
I certainly remember pretty long sessions, and I'd be frustrated if I would make mistakes. I mean, I remember one time I had to count a row of 6 blocks, kept messing up. That was really difficult.
No.
I need it. I need it.
At what point do you recall hearing the word autism?
I was able to figure out what I was going through without anybody having to tell me.
Our concern is if it's a big secret to hide. I don't know what we can say.
No one ever told you, you just discerned
But the
it?
reason I'm comfortable talking about this is because I felt it. In therapy, I certainly began questioning why people reacted as they did based on what I said and did. Particularly because of difficulties I was facing in school. It got to a point where I wanted to understand why it was. So I entered while still going through therapy and still showing significant signs of the mental condition. Even after I'd improved to a significant extent, there were those who still gave me a hard time for it.
Did it hurt your feelings when you were in school, the way that kids?
Oh, absolutely, because it was bullying, it was harassment.
That scares us.
They called me names. I was basically, when it came to sports and PE, I was usually the last kid chosen.
Did teachers intervene?
Fortunately, not really. I mean, it was just so hard for me to talk about it because of how ashamed I felt. Certainly the first few years of elementary school, I don't think I really had the most supportive teachers. I mean, I remember my mom told me how my first grade teacher once said that she thought I had no chance of getting anywhere. And going away to college and out of state and being the only person from my old school district has made a difference. It's just really improved my social life tremendously because I got to be me, because with nobody knowing about my past, I wasn't faced with these misconceptions and prejudgments.
Do you tell people, new people that you meet?
No, that's not the first thing I will ever
No, I would
tell.
hope it's not the
and
first thing.
You know what? In most cases, I never do, because while it's a part of my past, it doesn't define who I am. I mean, just thinking back to the very beginning, pretty much each episode, autism, what, not who.
I want to tell you right now, though, I'm so impressed with you.
Likewise.
I want you to know that.
Likewise. I mean, your son really inspires me just as much, because I'll tell you, anytime
I adore him, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't challenging.
I mean,
it's cost me the stuff that like career things, goals. I don't care about those anymore. I work at night. I'm tending bar. Not that I'm too good for that. I'm just saying that's what I do. I want him to have a chance.
Right.
And you inspire me now.
Thank you. The feeling goes both ways. The feeling's mutual.
Before you leave today, we would like you to meet Jack.
I would love to.
This is Nick. Hi,
Hey, Jack Riley.
All right, should we try this? I'm gonna try to take a picture of all of you. 1, 2, and 3.
Jack Riley, you rock.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I want to start to deal with some of the questions that you guys have sent in today, and then I want to backlog and go back to some of them from yesterday. So somebody wrote in on Facebook today and said, how do I figure out what he wants? He's nonverbal. He can't tell me ever what's wrong. He goes into meltdown mode because I can't figure out. He has ABA, so he's working on it, but I just want to know as a mother, how could I figure it out? I want to give you a bunch of different resources, and I know that Samantha sent you a link to Cognition and Speak Pros, the video. Okay, so we were just talking with the BCBA about functional communication. And we need to remember that functional communication is the way that you get your needs met. It isn't necessarily using spoken language. It could be pointing. It could be text. It could be, if you raise your eyebrow and a person understands what it means, that's functional, right? Let's face it, sometimes you can get that kind of I call it the Vulcan mind meld with somebody. But even though we might be led to believe that as a parent-child relationship that we automatically know what our kids need, we don't. We just don't. And I think it's not just autism parents, but especially autism parents. Your child clearly wants something and you can't figure out what it is, and it's frustrating for you and it's frustrating for them, and then they will act out. That's just normal. It doesn't look normal, but if you think, I always say this, if you were taken hostage by aliens who had, different hands and different faces than we have, so they had tentacles and you couldn't understand what the tentacles were saying and there was no spoken language and you were saying, I need a drink of water. I desperately need a drink of water, or I need a bathroom, or I need to eat, or I'm cold, and they were just tentacles and you didn't understand and they didn't understand what you were saying. How long would it be before you would throw a tantrum and start throwing stuff? Because I know me, and it would be like 7 seconds. You know what I'm saying? And that's what it's like for our kiddos. They've arrived here on this planet and we have this communication system that they're not in on. So functional communication looks to getting the kids to have a way to get their needs met first. And that we will attempt to see if we can get that to be spoken language. And as the BCBA was just saying, that's called manned training. But if a child isn't able to quickly get to speech, and I mean quickly, what happens, and we know this is scientifically proven to be effective, they very quickly will give the child another means of functional communication so that they can get their needs met, and they pair, as she was saying, speech with that. Nobody's giving up on the speech, right? But it is critical for the child to be able to get their needs met. And either way, it's man training. So we start with them requesting something that they want. So your child, comes up to you and maybe they grunt, or they push at you or do something, and that is a form of communication. And what they're just going to do is shape that up into something that actually gets them what they want. Now, in some cases, it's different for different kids, right? For some kids, though, one of the first things that they do is something that's an iconic communication system, and PECS is one of them. That's a picture exchange. Now, PECS, back in the old days, it was pictures. So there'd be a picture of, a hamburger, right? And the child could, take the picture and they would give it to you and you would give them a hamburger, which is a picture exchange communication system, right? But there are lots of these kinds of things that are less specific to picture exchange. They're iconic communication. So it's an icon on an iPad and they touch the hamburger icon. It's a picture of a hamburger, but they touch the icon and it says hamburger, right? And they look at you and then you get them the hamburger, or it could be juice or whatever, right? And you just heard the BCBA say, start with the 3 things that you know for sure that your child wants. But did you hear what she said about make sure that it's something that you're comfortable saying the only time they get this across the board, across everybody in the family, The only time they get it is when they request it. Because, you know, parents always have a hard time with this. You know, that initially go, I want my child to be able to communicate. So they say to you, what are the 3 things that he wants the most? Well, his Buzz Lightyear. He wants his Buzz Lightyear. And they go, okay, so are you going to be comfortable taking away the Buzz Lightyear and he only gets it when he requests it? And the parent, you initially go, yeah, no, absolutely, I can do that. But then you get in the nitty gritty of it and your child is, you know, tantruming and doing whatever. And at some point it becomes clear to you that they want the Buzz Lightyear, but they haven't done whatever the agreed thing is, that they have to touch. And sometimes it's different things. Sometimes it could be as simple as pointing to it. That might be enough for some kids. For other kids, they have to push the little button. For other kids, they have to give the picture of the Buzz Lightyear. For other kids, they have to say buh. And for other kids, they have to say buzz. It's what's appropriate for where the child is right then and there, right? Nobody's trying to tick the kid off, right? We get it. We start with whatever the easiest is so that they request the Buzz Lightyear, and that's when they get it. But we don't just give it to them. And that's hard in the beginning. So you have to make sure that it's something, if it's not okay for you to keep the Buzz Lightyear and you feel like that's stressful for the child, then that's not the thing you do. I think a lot of times parents get confused about that. They're like, well, you know, we're having to take away, right? I know I was that way. But only pick the things that you're comfortable saying, we're just going to give that. So you're not going to make that all food. You're just not. Right? Because the child needs to eat, but it might be the most preferred food. That, you know, they don't get the cookie, because we can all live without a cookie. Each and every one of us, no matter what age, we can. We're not starving anybody, but you see what I'm saying? But a cookie is a treat, right? And so they only get the cookie when they do something. And you decide with you're getting ABA, you decide with them what it is that they have to do. Do they have to point to the picture of the cookie? Do they have to push the cookie button on the iPad? Do they have to say, right? Or do they have to sign? Because sign is another way to do it too, that they sign and say cookie. Now, eventually, what happens is, and you got to give it immediately. So if you teach the child the sign, and you can say to them, what do you want? Do you want cookie? And then if you've decided that they have to do the cookie sign, you have to give it immediately. You don't talk about it. You know, you can be saying yay as you're doing the cookie, but you don't pause to go yay and then give the cookie. You got to give the cookie because it's the reinforcer. And what it says to the child, and you're building rapport with the child. So when the child does cookie or points to the cookie or presses cookie, whatever, they get a cookie. They need to know this works, and you got to do it all the time, and it's got to be immediate, right? And very quickly, the child will go, oh, I do this and you give me what I want. I'm going to push that button over and over, give me another cookie. And for a while, you just, you know, you need break them into smaller pieces so that you don't give your kid sugar shock. But, you know, you give them whatever there is requesting because you want to get it into their body that works. And you very quickly want to move on to another thing that they want and get them to request that. Then you start adding in other things for them. You know, do you want this? You got to do this. And what we want for very young kids is them requesting things upwards of 200 times an hour. I know it seems crazy, but that's when they really get it and they start wanting to communicate. Now, unfortunately, a lot of ABA providers, and I get a lot of parents who write in and they go, but you know, then we're stuck there. They'll say cookie, but how do you get to a full sentence? And then how do you get to conversation? Right? Well, it's very painstaking, but it works. So first, you know, maybe they had to push the button cookie. Then, and we're saying cookie as we're giving it to them and going, yay, but cookie. And so then at a certain point, we might, you know, prompt and go cook while they're signing, going, yeah, we're giving it to them, but cook. And the child says cook, right? They get the cookie. Then we go cook. So we get a little bit more, then we get to cookie, right? Then we add in want cookie, and we, you know, point to the lips and the child goes want cookie, right? And then we get I want cookie, then I want cookie please, right? Then by that point we're working on the other part of things, which is interverbals. Knowing that what's a thing for dessert that's round that you would like to eat. We didn't say cookie, but we build it so that the child, and we might prompt it, the child begins to say cookie, and then they fully have the word cookie in their vocabulary. It takes a while, and you got to be patient, but you got to start small. Pick 1 or 2 or 3 things. Talk to your ABA provider. Get really clear with them. They're probably already working on man training. They've already made a list probably of the things that they're working on for man training, and have a definition of how they want to do it. Ask them what it is, and ask them to teach you how to get the response from your child. Make them stand there while you do it and they prompt you. That's really the best way. And that way you'll be part of the team, you'll be doing it, and you will see that one way or the other, your child's functional communication will, right? And they will be requesting stuff. And that's just the beginning. There's a lot more work to come down the road, but I'll tell you what happens when man training happens. There are these graphs that they have of your child's challenging behaviors. And so your challenging behaviors might be up here, and your child's ability to communicate is way down here, right? But as your child's, on the graph, as your child's communication starts to go up, guess what happens to the challenging behavior? It starts to go down. And it makes this X. I'm trying to make an X with my hands. My goodness, I'm just not doing well. So it makes an X on the graph. And I always call it the magic X, because it means you're doing things right. The communication, functional communication, not necessarily speech, functional communication goes up and the challenging behavior goes down. The magic X is when your life starts to get better and you go, okay, now I know this, this is going to take a little bit of work, but this works. Okay. And you sign up. Okay. Mentally and otherwise. Moving on to the next question. Somebody wrote and said, how do I cope with stress on 13-year-old with meltdowns? And I'm going to assume that both things, stress that causes the meltdowns for the 13-year-old and stress for you. And I got to say, let's all take a breath together, right? Because, man, I get it. This is a very stressful thing. We were talking about this yesterday, that when your kid has meltdowns, it doesn't matter how high functioning your kid is. If your kid has meltdowns, you don't know when they're coming and where they're coming, and you live in fear of them, and it is stressful. So I want you to do a couple of things for yourself, and then a couple of things for your kiddo, right? The first thing that I want to do for yourself is that you gotta get your wagons in a circle and talk to friends and family and say, I'm going to need some help. I don't even know what the help is going to look like yet, but I'm going to need some help. Who's got a little extra time? And you can tell them, I might be asking you to come over and be at the house with me sometimes, or I might ask you to stay with my son while I go for a walk, or I might ask you to be here while I take a nap. I might ask you to help me with the laundry. I don't know what I'm going to be asking for yet, but I'm about to do something that's really, really tough, and I need some help and support. It won't take very much, and you'll immediately see who's on your page and who's not. And try not to take it personally when people are like, I don't know if people do that, they're not the people for this, right? But there are some people who are like, yes, honey, no, what do you need? Tell me what you need. You call me and I'll be there, right? Those are the people you want on your team, right? So, because when you have to do something tough, you got to be in the right kind of rested, right? You got to have the right perspective going into things, and it will help with your stress too. That, if you've gotten a little bit of rest, maybe gotten some time off, or had somebody help with the housework for a few minutes, it will help you to face this head on. Because during the time that you get a little bit of time, I want you to find some quiet time to just breathe. We're going to be talking about, in fact, I'm just going to go there right now for our mindfulness moment. We made a recording of a meditation a couple of years ago, because I personally find it very hard to meditate. I do. And I find it easier to listen to somebody while I'm meditating. So we did a meditation, and it's me talking to you for 11 minutes. It is considered a chakra meditation, where we talk about the different chakras. It's just a visualization, and it's about being able to get through the stressful moments. It's 11 minutes long, and I know that it's hard to carve out 11 minutes, and Samantha has the code for it on the screen right now, and we'll also post this on Facebook for those of you who are listening on iTunes. We'll post it on Facebook for you. So it's 11 minutes, and I guarantee you that if you do it and just breathe through it and listen to it, it will help you to reduce your stress throughout the day. It will help you to know that you're doing the right thing. It will help you to know that you're an awesome parent and that you have gifts that you don't even know you have, okay? So, and whether you do this meditation or something else, maybe start small. I like to tell you 3 breaths. Every time you get in the car, you sit for a moment, take 3 deep breaths, 3 deep out, right? That makes a world of difference in how much stress you have. And so maybe start there, work up to something longer. This is a free meditation. There are other ones that you can get on iTunes that you can buy after you've done this or before you've done this. If you don't want to listen to my voice anymore, because you may be sick of me, I get it. But there are meditations out there. And you've got to gift yourself a little bit of time, right? So then we have to look at why these meltdowns are happening. And I will tell you, the difference between a tantrum and a meltdown is usually that there's an environmental factor. And so think about that for a second, that people have tantrums because they're not in control and they're not getting what they want. But people have meltdowns because there's something else going on. So you see me folding the paper. If you watch the show, you know where I'm going with this, the 3-term contingency. We got to take some data. And so you can be a paper like this, but you fold it into 3s, and across the top you write A, B, C. A is the antecedent, B is the behavior, C is the consequence, right? And you start to keep a meltdown journal. Because right now, it feels like you have no control over it and you don't know when it's going to come and you don't know how it's going to happen. And part of what we need to do as parents is when our kids are having meltdowns, we have to stay calm in the moment. And it's really hard to do that. But one of the things we know is if we have another task to do, something to place our mind in, then the anxiety doesn't bubble up as much. When you're in action, it's harder to be anxious, right? So this is going to help you with the anxiety during the meltdown, but it's ultimately going to help prevent the meltdowns to begin with, and then it'll all just poof and go away. So you're now a court reporter. And this is going to be in your pocket or in your pocketbook or, somewhere that you can get at it. But when your child is having a meltdown, you're going to be like, oh, in a second, I'm going to have to pull out this piece of paper. But my first task during the meltdown is to make sure that he's safe and that I'm safe and that everybody else is safe, right? That's job number 1. Then job number 2 is to start thinking about what you're going to write in the behavior column later on. So you're a court reporter and you're noticing, oh, he's screaming and he's spitting. And you might even, look at your watch or look at your phone and note the time and say, okay, it's 10:02. And he's screaming and yelling and whatever. Oh, now it's 10:04 and he's kicking the couch. And oh, now it's 10:06 and he's doing this. There is something about removing yourself from the emotion of it and standing back and going, what's happening? As if you're reporting it to a courtroom. It's going to help you to write it down in between, but there's something about that separation that helps remove the stress. It's what our therapists do and how they maintain a certain level of calm because they're noting it all in their brain. Later on, you're going to write that down in the behavior column. And then you're going to think to yourself, okay, what happened right before this? And write anything at all. Like, honestly, journal in that A column because you don't know what's going to pop out. You do want to note the time and say this started at 10:02. So what happened before 10:02? What did he eat for breakfast? What's he wearing? What was happening in the environment? Was the television on? Was there also noise happening over there? Was somebody yelling something in the backyard? And really pay attention to all of your child's senses. What could your child see? What could they hear? What were they tasting? What were they touching? All of those different senses, because you would be amazed how often it's that something else was on board. Sometimes, and then let me finish this thought, then do the consequences, what happened as a result, right? But with meltdowns, I will tell you that this column is going to be the most important almost always. because something's triggering a meltdown. And it's almost always something that has to do with a sensory overload. Sometimes it's that the child has ingested something and it's a food allergy, but that's a sensory thing too. If any of you have food allergies, and you've ever eaten something that you didn't know had the allergen in it and you start to feel it, right? I have a wheat allergy, not a gluten allergy, a wheat allergy. And if I've eaten wheat, man, I can feel it. My skin starts to prickle, I feel hot, and I feel angry. And I go, I'm not angry about anything, but I'm hot and I'm uncomfortable, and my skin prickles everywhere. It's not pretty, let me just tell you. And usually now at this age, I know to go, take a Benadryl and go away from people because I'm not fit for human consumption. But imagine if I was a 3-year-old having this reaction. So you're gonna start to notice, and even list what did they eat before. Especially if you're seeing in the column, in the behavior, what's happening. Their face got red, their ears got red. They were itching while they were doing things. Notice all those things, because then it might be a food allergy. But sometimes it can be a scratchy tag in the back of their shirt. It can be socks that are too tight. It can be, a certain pair of shoes. It can be the light coming in from a window and being in the corner of their eye. But you will start to notice trends, and you will become a detective and start to figure out what triggers the meltdown. I've had lots of families that have changed what their child wore. They changed the schedule. They changed where the child sat. Because, if we don't have to trigger these meltdowns, we don't have to do it. I've told the story many times before that my child would have a tantrum in the same grocery store, in the same place over and over and over again, and I just could not figure it out. And I was doing this, but ultimately what I needed, and I told you, get a friend, because you might need them for various and sundry things. Sometimes if you can get another set of eyes watching, you can figure out what's going on. And I brought one of our therapists with us, and I said, I can't figure it out. Why is he having a tantrum right here in this store all the time? And it's because the floor changed from a slick floor to a grid tile. And I did not realize that my child was he felt like he was going to fall through the cracks. And they knew it as soon as they saw it, but I couldn't have seen that forever. I just couldn't have. And so what they did for him was they used sensory desensitization and helped him to be able to, he doesn't have any problem walking on tiled floors, and we don't have those kinds of meltdowns. So, it's a little bit of work, but oh my gosh, it would be so worth it, right? And it will help your stress when you feel like you're doing something positive. So take the time for yourself, meditate, then do this and talk to your team and say, I'm going to be taking data on it. You guys take data on it. I want some help figuring this out, okay? I'm moving on. We're almost to Tom Island. Catherine wrote in, because we asked you, how do you deal with your anger? And she said, I take a mommy time out. I go to the bathroom, take a few deep breaths, and go back collected. I think that's awesome. Mommy time out. Angel wrote in on Facebook and said, I live near Long Beach, California. Is there resources to get an advocate, an affordable advocate? Yes, there are. So a couple of different things I want to tell you. If you live in Long Beach, take advantage. Bonnie Yates, special education attorney at Here G and Chow, has said that if you want to do an intake with her, it's a free consultation. And you don't have to, at the end, agree to, retain her or her law firm. Take advantage of that. Start there. But I will also tell you that there's an organization called the Special Needs Network. Ariva Martin, who is an amazing mom and an advocate, she has the Special Needs Network, and you can find them online. specialneedsnetwork.org, I believe, is their website. They train parents to be advocates. You can decide to take the training and become an advocate yourself, or they can connect you with parents who've already been through the training who could potentially be an advocate for you. So that's who I would recommend, and they're here in Los Angeles. There are, of course, many more advocates. There are a bunch of events that are coming up in the month of April that have resource fairs, and I would tell you go to some of them and meet people and get people's business cards and ask them if they do free consultations. I used to go around and do free consultations, 3 and 4 times a week because I couldn't afford to pay for somebody. So I would go to each person and take a little bit of advice and then, go in and handle it myself. But that was back in the day when there wasn't more. So I encourage you, check out those resources. Okay. Tana says, my coworkers have laughed with me for years now because I tried to describe that sensation you were just speaking of and said that I become red hot with anger. Oh, sister. Can we talk? I'm glad you decried that angry feeling in a way I can relate to because they honestly thought I was crazy when I said I was hot with anger. LOL. Yeah, no, I mean, if you, people, when your blood pressure goes up, and it can be because of emotion or it can be because you've got something extra happening, man, my ears get hot. It's not good. It's not pretty. And I'm physically, you can feel I'm physically hot. I'm running a temperature, but it's a wheat allergy. It's not good. Doesn't feel good. Jessica says, how do we work on incorporating more and different foods in a child that is very rigid and eating the same 8 to 10 food choices a day? Oh, I love this question. We've had many experts on the show talking about this. I'm still holding this up. And the research shows clearly that because children's taste buds, they haven't killed off their taste buds yet. Their taste buds are young and fresh, and they can taste things that you and I can't taste. They can taste bitter. They don't like certain things. They don't even taste the same to them as to us. And that old saying about, oh, it's an acquired taste? Well, one of the things that they know, they've done tons of research on food selectivity, is that whenever you're introducing a food, it, on average, in order for a child to eat it, has to be presented, I think it's 21 times. It's a high number like that. And when you think about that, how many times have you actually presented it? And they're talking about presenting it, putting it on the plate, and not making them accountable for eating it, just putting it there. So that's 21 times. One of the other things that we talk about with food selectivity is that kids tend to have certain issues. It might be a crunch factor, it might be a temperature factor, it might be a color factor, that they're picky along certain lines. And it's kind of important to notice what the thing is, right? So if they only like things that are crunchy, or they only like things that are salty, or they only like things that are cold and smoothie, or they won't eat things that are cold and smoothie, you kind of take that into consideration. And once we know for sure there's no medical issue, because some kids don't like certain foods because they're harder for them to swallow. So if you feel like there's anything along those lines going on, make sure you take them to a doctor and check to make sure that everything's working properly, right? But other than that, one of the things that they found to be really effective is basically the Jessica Seinfeld cookbook. You remember Jessica Seinfeld made this cookbook years ago where she was sneaky and she snuck food into other things. So she would make brownies for her kids, but she would sneak broccoli into the brownies. Well, it's basically that, but what the research shows is that if you want a child to eat broccoli and they won't eat broccoli, and they love chocolate and they love brownies, what you would do is you would start out and make your brownies the way you typically do, but you would take and puree some broccoli, and you have your batch of brownies, and you would take like a tablespoon of the broccoli, stick it in, it gets lost in the chocolate, child doesn't know. But it's still there, and you're actually desensitizing their taste buds to it. So you feed them the brownie. Okay, 2 days later, you make the same brownie again, and you put, 4 tablespoons in, and you mix it in. And if the child eats it and doesn't know, great, you're moving on. If the child goes, oh, this tastes funny, you back up and put something slightly more than the 1 tablespoon, but less than the 4 tablespoons. You see what I'm saying, right? You constantly find the area where they're like, oh yeah, it's the brownie that I like, and they eat it. But you say nothing. You don't disclose what you're doing, right? And eventually you add more and more broccoli over time until you end up at a place where you're giving them mashed broccoli with a little bit of brownie on the top. And I'm telling you, because I know you're like, oh, that would never work with my kid. I'm telling you, if you do it nice and slow, it absolutely works. And that you can get, and Jessica Seinfeld has a cookbook with all these recipes for ways to sneak food into things. And I'm just going to tell you, I did this, but I didn't do it with my child because my child has always loved vegetables, just because, right? But my husband, not so much on the vegetable thing. So I started making a meatloaf that had carrots and broccoli in it, and I just didn't put the breadcrumbs and the eggs and all that stuff in. I put ground carrots and broccoli in and some salt and pepper, and my husband, I said nothing, my husband ate the meatloaf, and I didn't start with 2 tablespoons. I put like 2 cups in this meatloaf, and my husband was like, man, this meatloaf is great. What'd you do? I'm just telling you guys. Start with our kiddos, though, start small, because their taste buds are not, they're fresh. They haven't been beat upon like ours have. Okay, I think I've got the questions from today, so I think there's a good place to stop for a second. We're going to take a short break while I load up the questions from yesterday. Stick with us.
Can you have a life with autism? Absolutely not. Give it up right now. No, that's not true. I'm here to tell you, you can have a life with autism. I have a life with autism, and it's a good one. When you start on this journey, you don't know what's going to happen. You really have no idea. You're kind of in shell shock for the first couple years. It could be as long as 5 years until you realize, I do matter to people. When my son was first diagnosed, I remember thinking I would go anywhere and do anything for him. I didn't even think about it. I just came way at the bottom of the list. However, after a few years passed, I realized if I'm not important anymore, then that means no one's going to be here for him. So how do you have this life with autism? It's not easy. It's never going to be easy, but it can be done. It's really all about support. And support is a word you're going to hear a lot when you deal with the autism power structure. And that means schools, government agencies, social service agencies that can help you. There are things out there that you don't even know exist. So once you start connecting with other parents, you're going to kind of find this treasure chest full of things that only they can help you unlock. But once you get that support, it could be a babysitter coming to your home. It could be a therapist to take your child out and get him into the community. You can either leave the house, do your shopping, go to a farmer's market, do whatever you want to do. And it doesn't matter if it's really only about 5% of your time. As long as it's dedicated to you, that's going to help. It's all about your willingness to find support and your willingness to accept change and your willingness to kind of stick up for yourself, because you're battling for your child and you have to realize you guys are connected. There's a bond between you and your child that can never be broken. And if you're doing well, then your child's going to do well. So finding what you need to be happy, whole, and healthy as a person is a way that you can have a life with autism. And that's important too, because if you have a life with autism, you can also give your child a life too.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're trying to get through as many of the questions as we can from yesterday and today. I've got some on the live feature, but I'm going to go to some of the ones from yesterday. And some of them we're going to heavily refer to experts next week. But Charlene wrote in and said, how do you get 2 autistic children who are 3 to get along, twins, especially if you leave them alone with each other, as I have a baby as well? And I'm going to lovingly say to you, Charlene, that we need to get you some extra help. because 3-year-olds on the autism spectrum, it's really hard to leave them alone. That's going to be a tough thing, and I get it that you got another baby, but I think you need some help and support. I want to suggest that the 3-year-olds need to, for most of the day, need to be having intensive behavioral intervention, ABA. And that the best solution for them is to get it in a center-based system. And I don't say that lightly. I had a 3-year-old who was on the autism spectrum, and school was telling me, oh, he needs to be here 8.5 hours a day. And I was like out of my mind thinking, how can that be? I went and looked at that program and said, this isn't right for my child, because it wasn't. But I'm telling you, go look at a center-based ABA program, find a good quality one. I highly recommend CARD, of course, because ultimately they're the people who treated my son. And you'll see that the kids are happy and they're learning and they're growing. And what will be especially awesome is that the twins, for a good part of the day, will be working one-on-one with a therapist who will only be working with them one-on-one. I can't imagine, in our family, we had a set of twins. They were not on the autism spectrum, but I remember when they were born, twins tend to have a language with each other first, and they tend to talk a little bit later than kids who aren't twins. And because they have this communication between each other. And I can't even imagine for kids who are on the autism spectrum how many more extra things that adds in. And I know how the twins in our family, they had a slightly older sibling instead of a slightly younger sibling, and they craved one-on-one attention. And it was my sister that had 3 kids, and it was just really, really rough for her. So I can't imagine factor autism into that, and it's a whole other ballgame, right? But the good news is that if your twins are at a center and they're being worked on with different therapists one-on-one, that need to get that one-on-one attention is going to be met in a pretty big way. I'm not saying that they're not ever going to crave one-on-one attention at home, but that bucket will have at least been substantially filled, right? So that they won't be as needy for your one-on-one attention, and they will give them the skills to want to play with each other, because they're going to teach them how to play with other kids too. And they will work with them separately, and then they will teach them together to play together. So I really, really want to encourage you. 3 is the perfect, most ideal time for your kids to be getting that kind of an intervention. And I will tell you that a lot of parents say to me, well, I'm just going to wait because it'll be more convenient when they're 4, and then my other child or my job or my car or this or whatever. Please don't do that. Don't do that. We know that if they get 30 to 40 hours of ABA at the age of 3, that is life-changing. Life-changing. And that if you wait till 4, there is so much that you have to catch up on, that they're still going to make tremendous progress, but you'll have a much harder time, and a lot of folks don't get caught up. So I urge you to do that. If that is just totally not possible because you don't live anywhere near an ABA provider or you don't have insurance for ABA, and I caution you to check because so much has changed. But if that is the case, then I really want to encourage you to get skills and work on things in the play curriculum to try to get your kids to be able to interact with each other. And I'll give you a hint, it's got to be really reinforcing. It has to be something where the big whatever they love only happens when they're together. But that's going to be super duper rough for you. I wouldn't want to face that if I had a baby and 2 kids on the spectrum. So I want to encourage, write to me. I'll help you to fight for ABA. Let's get you some ABA. Desiree wrote in yesterday and said, how can I get my 9-year-old with Down syndrome and autism to stop hitting her head and screaming all the time? I'm trying everything. That is under the heading of, I don't want to say that it absolutely is, but it's under the heading of self-injurious behavior. There are a couple of things that a BCBA would ask you about the behavior, about does it happen all the time. Like if somebody is like, if she's sitting in her crib by herself, does she do it when nobody else is there watching it? Have you seen it on a monitor? Because if there's an element where she's doing it when you're in the room, then it would be something that might be attention seeking. But if it truly is self-injurious behavior, those happen for very specific reasons. And kids who hit themselves in the head, it usually is because they're having pain. And I would encourage you, you've got to be working with a BCBA, and I would take this baby to the doctor and have them looked at and say it's the same thing with kids that we see that, you know, push on their eyes. Sometimes we have blind kids that push on their eyes because it alleviates pain or it makes colors. If you've ever had a pain someplace, I remember when my wisdom teeth were coming in, it hurt so bad, and the only thing that made it feel better was pressure that also hurt, but it was a different kind of pain, if that makes sense. So please take this child to a doctor and tell them that she's repeatedly hitting herself in the head, and please work with a qualified BCBA, but I would immediately get to a doctor. We got 2 more minutes here. Raina says, hi, Shannon, just found out that my non-ASD daughter could have gotten ABA therapy paid for by Medicaid with her unidentified neurological disorder a year ago, and the doctors kept saying she couldn't get paid ABA. I know my kid has autism, and I am mad I didn't know this before, and for the lack of information the doctors and insurance gives to parents, now waiting for the waitlist game for getting ABA, and I'm near Seattle, Washington. You know, here's why I say we hold hands and we do this together, because I am not aware of all the pockets of all the different things, and if I read this right, you have a daughter who's on the spectrum and a daughter who's not on the spectrum, and that the one who's not on the spectrum could have gotten ABA. I don't know about that. So when you guys write in and say these things, it's information for all of us. So I encourage you, when you find something out, share, because we all need to hear these things. I'm not getting to all of these, plus we have more on the live feature, but we've waited long enough. It's time to get Tom Island in here. We've got an interview with him that I think you guys are going to find very enlightening and uplifting. So don't go away. Stick with us. We're going to be right back with Tom Island.
Inclusion is everything. Feeling like we have a place where we belong, and when I say we, I'm first and foremost a mother of a child on the spectrum and not, and gym owner and now founder of carrying this to families who need it as well.
My son is extremely hyperactive. Getting him to calm down is a very difficult task. So the idea of Rock the Spectrum Gym, where he could just go and run and play and do all these fun things without any kind of worries and just go, go, go and bring down that energy, it helps us so much at home. You know, in the home or at school, it's not acceptable, but this is the one place it is acceptable for the child to kind of be themselves and get it all out there and just really just be themselves.
It's an amazing place where my son could go and be himself. You get to meet other parents who are in the same journey as you are.
I think the most popular aspect of it is how they include all children of all types, not just only learning disabled, lower functioning, moderate functioning, high functioning, and non-disabled.
People there are so friendly. Everybody's like family. They always greet you with a smile. There's not one negative thing I could say about any of the employees. They're all absolutely amazing. So I think every parent should walk in through those doors and see what an amazing gym it is.
Now a diagnosis meaning 1 out of 6 kids are in some way or form affected with sensory processing disorder or autism. That's why We Rock Now is on the rise. People want to be a part of it. People know that They have a community there. They know that they can learn more information about things that they don't know themselves or that they can share, build friendships, and basically get what you get in an OT facility, but it's not $150 an hour. It's $12.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Johansson, and this is My Little House.
My Little House is an interactive, multi-sensory educational felt toy that I invented to help develop children's language skills.
I love My Little House.
I've been working as a speech therapist for over 20 years. I have spent my entire career working with young children. I work with children with language delays, and I have many children with significant cognitive disabilities and children on the autism spectrum. It has been a constant challenge finding toys that are fun, educational, and actually engage my students. In every preschool, since I've been a young therapist, we carry on these felt boards. Kids love them because they're soft and they're fluffy, and there's usually these little pieces that attach to these boards because felt sticks onto felt. You bring them into the activity because they're putting a piece on the board. So it's almost kind of like magic. So then I just thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just take this one-dimensional board and make it into an actual three-dimensional toy? How cool would that be?
That's the idea behind My Little House. You can spread it out flat like a 4-panel felt board, or here's the cool part. In the blink of an eye, My Little House easily converts into a 3-dimensional reversible house.
This is the outside. This is the inside.
My Little House comes with 36 felt cutout pieces that match outlines in 8 colorful rooms. And they're felt, so they stick. Each piece inside My Little House has been placed with purpose.
For instance, in the kitchen, whole, half, under, on top, inside, big, bigger, and biggest, empty and full, circle, triangle, inside, outside.
Really cool thing, I have a nonprofit, Lecotech. They are the folks that put out the Differently Able Guide for Toys R Us. They've been doing it for 25 years. They gave me their seal of approval as a toy that they feel is a toy with purpose, and that will make a difference. But My Little House isn't just for kids on the spectrum or with significant disorders. It's also for typically developing 2 to 5-year-olds. It's a fun toy.
This is so soft. That piece goes.
Recently, I took My Little House to the American Speech and Hearing Association convention in Philadelphia, and the response from my peers was overwhelming. Hundreds of therapists, teachers, and heads of school districts wanted to order them.
It was real validation for me that this truly is a toy that needs to get out there.
Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod. I'm a proud autism mom, I'm a former educator, and I am the host of Autism Live. And as all 3 of those things, I want to recommend to you My Little House. This is one of the smartest toys I have ever seen for teaching language to kids who have emerging language. Whether they're on the autism spectrum or completely neurotypical, it's a great, fun, reinforcing toy, but it's especially great for our kids that are on the autism spectrum because it makes learning fun and it makes it tactile. They have these felt shapes and they get to match them up. And I'm telling you, even the adults love to play with this. We loved this toy so much that we wanted to be able to bring it to you at a great discount. So right now, if you will go to www.smartfelttoys, and when you get to the coupon code, put in a-live.com, you'll get $5 off. Isn't that great? So I want to encourage you, go and get My Little House for all the kiddos in your life. Welcome back to Autism Live. We are all very lucky right now because in the studio with us live is the fabulous Tom Island. He's an author and an advocate and just a wonderful human being who has a lot of good things, inspirational things, and a fabulous speaker too, I have to say that. And as we welcome Tom, I want to point out that Tom came and he was wearing the most fabulous lime green tie. I mean, I was like, look at how fabulous you look, and it did not play well with our green screen. So we had to ask Tom to take off his tie. So I want you guys to know he showed up in a tie, but we've asked him to take it off. Tom, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me again, Shannon. Happy International Women's Day.
You know what? Thank you for reminding me of that. I totally was going to talk about that at the top of the show, and I forgot it is International Women's Day. Woohoo!
Yay! And,
woot!
And a big shout out to all the women out there, parents, teachers, therapists, professionals that are on the front line for our young people with autism, especially my mother, Emily Island, who's played a huge part in my success.
My goodness. Don't we all wish that someday our kids will sit here and talk about us this way? Congratulations, Emily. You did well. But she had good material to work with, too, because you're pretty fabulous. Let's just recap for people who haven't seen you before, Tom. How and when did you come into the autism community?
Certainly. Well, I was born with it, first of all, and diagnosed with it officially at 13. And I overcame a lot of struggles on a personal and professional level. I finally got a girlfriend after so many years. I moved out of my parents' house and got full-time employment, a college degree, even a CPA license, and went on to work for lots of corporate America companies, Disney, Deloitte, Princess Cruises, and I finally got permanent employment. But at that point, I found accounting wasn't for me. Right. I wasn't happy, and I heard more and more stories of my peers struggling to know themselves, love themselves, and be themselves. So I left accounting behind altogether 2 years ago and wrote a book with my mother, Come to Life, Your Guide to Self-Discovery, to help shape the futures of people with autism and other learning differences. It became an Amazon #1 bestseller, and it won the Mom's Choice Literary Achievement Award last month. And my mother, she is quite the supermom, translated into Spanish herself, and we premiered it in Mexicali. So we're getting out there, and I'm telling my peers that life doesn't come to you, it's up to you to come to life. So if you're just sitting there waiting for some kind of miracle or something to happen to you, it's you that has to go make it happen for yourself.
What an amazing point of view. Did I not promise and did he not deliver? And this is an amazing, amazing book, I have to say. Lots of great exercises. A lot of you write in and have teenagers and are wondering, you know, how do you get them, as a lot of us say, fully cooked? How do you get people to the point where they're ready to be out in the world and doing their thing, whatever that is? And there are some amazing exercises. You guys gave my son and I an opportunity to do some of the exercises, and we found it really beneficial and are still talking about it and doing things from the book. I highly recommend this. And you mentioned, I didn't know that it had become a Amazon #1 bestseller. Obviously, we can get it on Amazon. Is that the main place to get it?
You can get there also at my website at thomasisland.com.
Yes, it's important to recognize that the last name, it's not like island where you go for a vacation. There's no S. There's no S in island.
No S in island.
There we go. So I love the fact that you talk so freely about the fact that you had challenges that you overcame. But we all look up to you anyway, because you did manage to get a college degree. You did manage to become a certified accountant. You did manage to do all of these things. But I think on top of that, Tom, the fact that you then recognized, all right, I've achieved all these things, but I have a higher calling. I have something else that inside me I need to do. And the fact that you followed that, to me, that's the ultimate in everything. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that a gift that you give to other people in the book, to recognize what they want and what they don't want. I think that's wonderful. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you.
But since you were last on the show, you've had a lot going on. And there have been a lot of achievements that you have done. So talk to us about some of the credentialing. And there was a big announcement of, I'm going to let you talk.
Okay. It is your show, but I'll say a few things here and there.
Yeah, I want to hear from you. Yes.
Okay. Well, in order to become a better speaker and get onto stages and get my voice and my message out there, I took up Toastmasters. It's a not-for-profit that helps people improve their public speaking, their communication, and their leadership. And there are only about 4,000 of what's called distinguished Toastmasters in the world. It's like getting a PhD in public speaking, and you have to help charter a club, you have to help members accomplish their goals. You have to do so many speeches and so many roles yourself. So I became a distinguished Toastmaster in October, and another program offered through Toastmasters is called the Accredited Speaker Program. There are only about 75 of them in the world, and I applied for that in January. It combines the craft or the art of public speaking with expertise on a particular topic. So I'm actually going to say, when I get to the next level of the accredited speaker process, I'm going to go to the Toastmasters International Convention and audition before a panel of judges. And if they think I am the cream of the crop, I'm going to be called an accredited speaker.
I love that.
And I've also joined the National Speakers Association, or NSA, in order to expose my message and hopefully get some more speaking engagements and really look outside the autism community as well. Because I think other organizations, in corporate America, other businesses can benefit from hiring people with autism and seeing the potential and the possibilities more than the perils and the problems.
Amen to that.
And I have lived it, having gone through many internships and temp jobs and permanent employment in those companies. I can say what worked and what didn't and why.
Absolutely.
And I've also gone and joined the board of the Southern California chapter of Autism Speaks in January. I did that earlier this year. And I'm also being considered for the advisory committee of the Miracle Project.
Wonderful. Those are all huge, huge achievements. And yet you've got more things that you want to do. You now are, I understand, coaching. Tell us a little bit about that.
Basically, as I mentioned earlier, I want to help my peers and even their parents or their family members or people that are in their inner circle, their allies, as we call them, and come to life.
Yeah.
By working with this team and seeing that there is potential and helping somebody with autism know themselves, love themselves, be themselves, more specifically their best selves, and then they can find their niche and find their voice. It's an ongoing process called self-discovery that often gets overlooked. So we call this book a prequel to transition. So before we bring someone to the table and ask them all those questions, what do you want to do? Where do you see yourself? What are you good at? And get a bunch of I don't know responses, I'm going to coach them, take them through the process, ask the right questions to generate the answers, or at least get their wheels turning, so then they can start to narrow down what they want and what they don't, so that they can live the life that they want.
Right.
Because when our young people don't answer the questions, or maybe just want to not rock the boat, or want to make others happy, or think they know what's best for me, I'm just going to not say anything, when really they do want to say no, or they don't agree with something, that could very well be a cause of what's making them depressed or unhappy, because they're living a life that's not theirs.
Yeah.
So I'm here to tell you, you do choose your own future. You make the decisions, and you have to be the one that says something or does something.
I love that message, Tom, because it's very empowering. You know, it's this, you know, people can move through the world and be like, stuff is happening to me, or I'm affecting what's happening.
Yes.
And I think that's an empowering shift, and it's an empowering shift for anybody. So if people wanted to be coached by you, and I would assume that anybody could be coached by you. It doesn't necessarily need to be somebody who's on the autism spectrum. There's a whole lot of people who aren't on the autism spectrum that are having trouble figuring out what they want to do in life. So I would assume you coach anybody, correct?
I would totally coach anybody that is interested in looking inside, and because, you know, sometimes the most basic questions can be the most difficult to answer, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be asked.
That's right.
And we have to take a deep look inside ourselves and find out what we really want and start making things happen for ourselves. So whether you have autism or you don't, if you have another learning difference beside autism or not, you can reach out to me and we'll see what can be done and see you become your best self.
I love that. So, but is it only people that in the Los Angeles area, or can you do, you know, like Skype and meet with somebody, say, in New York?
I do have Skype, and I'm also looking into online meetings or virtual meetings, so I can reach out to people, and I have spoken to people in other countries about what they're up to and how we can help each other out, really partnering and commingling.
I love that.
So I really want my message and the content in this book, and the Spanish version as well, to be available in other countries, because it's like the ripple effect. One small little pebble like me can have a widespread effect.
Absolutely. And so is there an age range, Tom, that you think is best for this? Like, are you looking for people that are over the age of 18, or do you take 15-year-olds? Do you take 12-year-olds? Who would be the perfect age to be coached by you?
It's a great question, and Come to Life was written with 12-year-olds and older in mind, because as we start to think about those transition years, like junior high to high school to college, other adult like interactions and situations, that's what the book is more designed for, and I think I would work best with people 12 and older.
Okay. Well, I just want to say to parents, I've got a teenager, and I've been saying on the show lately that my voice is like nails in my teenager's head, because, and there are things that we want for our kids, that I want for my kid, but at a certain point, I'm recognizing that I'm not the person he's going to hear it from. It doesn't matter if I know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter if it's good advice. Our kids, especially, for those of us who have boys, they need to hear this from other people, and they need to hear it from other men. And what a fabulous role model Tom is. I think you're a perfect person to be a coach to our kids, because you've done it, you've lived it, you understand where they're coming from, and you can help them to find the path, and they'll listen to him. My son's not going to listen to me, that's for sure. And those are difficult years.
They are, and I know kids, whether they have autism or not, but they're going through puberty, or they just want to be in their own little world, they'll shut themselves off to everyone and everything. And yes, parents do have good intentions, as well they should. And eventually there comes a time where the parents have to see that young people can do things by themselves. They do have the potential. I was just doing an interview the other day explaining that ships were not built to sit in harbors. Caterpillars eventually become butterflies. They don't stay cocoons forever, and birds eventually leave the nest. How else are they going to know they can fly?
Absolutely.
So our young people need to be given permission to see their potential, that they do have it. And parents, I want to assure you that everything is going to be okay.
What a wonderful, wonderful message. You know what? I want to back up just a little bit and go back to when you were a teenager and you were being diagnosed, because I'm sure that there are people who are watching right now who are like, this young man ever had challenges? This young man ever had difficulties? But you did, and to get a diagnosis at the age of 13.
Officially.
Yes. But you were having symptoms much earlier than that, things that should have, raised warning bells to doctors, but weren't. But what were the kinds of challenges that you were facing around the time that you got diagnosed? Do you remember?
Based on what my mother's told me, because I personally don't recall a lot of the instances. And for instance, when I was 4 years old, I was living in Illinois. That's where I was born. And my aunt, my mother's sister, was the autism specialist for the state of Illinois, and thought I might be on the spectrum, and actually took me for a screening without my mother's knowledge. And I'm not thinking twice about it. I'm thinking, okay, I'm spending a day with my aunt, playing some word games, rearranging a few shapes. Little did I know I was being screened for autism.
Wow.
And basically the criteria at the time said my intellectual capacity was off the charts, not autism.
Right.
And my mother, when she found out, she confronted my aunt, how dare you suggest my son have autism? And was in denial about it for so many years. Meanwhile, I'm lining up my toys, having my own fun, recording Sesame Street, rewinding my favorite parts over and over again, and being in the corner, having my own fun. And this happens a lot in our society today for young people, again, with and without autism. When people with autism go attempt to interact with their peers, but they get rejected, or they're seen as weird, maybe they're not in the corner by choice.
Yeah.
Maybe they've been banished to the corner, and that is the sad and harsh reality. So fast forward to when I'm 13 years old, and the criteria diagnostic-wise did change. You can have be intellectually gifted and have social behavior and communication difficulties associated with autism, and that's where I got the diagnosis. But the signs were there based on a story my mother told me. My sister Lisa would get calls from friends looking to hang out. My brother Danny would get calls from friends looking to hang out. One day I asked my mom, why doesn't the phone ever ring for me? And she had to think on her toes.
Yeah.
And that was eventually what started the conversation between her, my dad, and myself. They sat me down at the kitchen table and told me about my diagnosis and what it meant and how it impacted me. And I'm in my room crying for about an hour. The pillow was soaked. But then I came back and said, you know, Mom, this explains a lot.
Yeah.
I finally had some answers. So that explains why I'm rewinding movies, lining up my toys, why I do the things I do. Yeah. Now, mind you, it's not an excuse, because young kids might think, oh, I can get away with bad stuff, say, oh, I have autism, or it's because of my autism. My parents didn't see it that way, and neither did I, because if they told me that, yes, we're going to fight for you, yes, we're going to get you the help you need, but you have to be the person that does it. Yeah. And you cannot lean on autism or think that it's going to hold you back. Right. If anything, it's going to propel you forward.
I love that kind of thinking, and that's the kind of thinking we need to spread to our kids. But I wanted to go back and talk about, because, you know, there's always dissenters, right? Mm-hmm. There's always people who are like, oh, I don't know that he ever had autism. And so I wanted you to have an opportunity to talk about some of the challenges that you went through. But I also want to say, too, that this is the first time that I invited you to be on the show where it's just you and I. Your mother is a tour de force. Mm-hmm. I have so much respect for your mother, and she's an amazing woman who, you know, I'm always following your mother's snowshoe prints, yes. Right? Because she forged away. And she's incredible. But when this book came out, you had some people who were like, well, I think the mother wrote it. And I wanted Tom to have an opportunity to speak to all of you so that you could hear and have absolutely no doubt that this is, you know, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree at all. This young man is a force to be dealt with. He's a mover and a shaker. He's got a voice of his own and is speaking things to our community that are important and people need to take note of. And I just want to applaud you for standing on your own 2 feet, and that I know for a fact that you were a driving force in this book. And anybody who wants to say different, you're going to have to go through me, right? And let's put that to rest, because that was not what happened. So you and I were talking before about that it's about to be April, mm-hmm. and a lot happens during April. There are just more events. I don't mean to make it sound like, no other time of the year are we talking about autism, because we're talking about autism 24/7. But there are more events in April, more opportunities for people to see you. You already have some things. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to talk about that's going on?
Even before April, I've got a couple of events locally happening in March that I'll tell you about.
Okay, let's do that.
Let's start with Sunday, March 12th, I believe it is. I'm going to be at the Skirball Cultural Center off of Sepulveda. The Art of Autism, I'm on their board as treasurer. Uh-huh. They're going to be screening A-Train, or the A-Train. So I'm going to be there talking about Come to Life.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because we were going to connect and try to have them on, and I don't know what happened. But that's this weekend then. That's
Sunday.
This Sunday. And it's a tell them what it is, what the show is.
From 2 to 4 p.m., the A-Train. And the description actually escapes me at this moment.
Well, what I remember about it is that it's a performance piece, mm-hmm. a one-woman show, a mom talking about her journey with a child having autism. So, which just really, I think sounds exciting. And so you're going to be there at that.
I will. And also Saturday, March 24th, I'm going to be in Reseda. Another event that I think my mother and you have talked about on this show, Be Safe.
Yeah.
This is a critical project and process of training our young people how to interact with the police. Not just training police how to interact with people with autism. People with autism need to know how to interact with the police as well. So through the fantastic Friends of San Fernando Valley, from 1 to 3 on Saturday the 24th, there's going to be an event. You have to register for it, though, if you want to know where it is. We're going to bring together local police and local people with various disabilities, not just autism. They're going to watch scenes from Be Safe and then do games and activities and then start to build that relationship, that trust, and so that they're no longer strangers.
Absolutely.
This is what's causing a lot of people with autism to wind up in trouble with the law. They don't know the officers. The introduction hasn't been made. They're running, fighting, reaching, and reaching. So Be Safe is going to show them what to do instead. And the police are going to offer some insight as well.
I love that. And where is that taking place?
Saturday, March 24th. You have to register through the San Fernando Valley Fantastic Friends. It's through the CSUN Family Focus Center. and then they give you the location, because
Okay.
it's technically a private event, but if you register, let them know
Okay.
you're coming, then you can
Then they'll
view
tell
it.
you where it's happening.
And,
Okay.
and for Be Safe products, you can visit besafethemovie.com for video modeling and self-disclosure materials that'll help your young person be safe when they meet the police.
Which is, could there be anything more important than that, especially in these times that we live in? So Be Safe the movie, love that. So those are happening before
in
April.
March, yeah. Now we
Amazing.
get to April.
Okay.
Back to the Art of Autism. Saturday, April 7th, I will be in El Cajon with them at Sophie's Gallery. I'll be selling and promoting the book there. My mother and I are scheduled to go on the road the week after that to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Wow.
And
will you guys be doing Be Safe there, or just speaking about the book and that kind of thing? Do you know?
Both.
Both.
That we'll touch on, particularly about Come to Life and helping people with autism, and Be Safe will be like a side project, but it still has value and importance. So we're going to mention it.
Okay, wonderful. And so that gets us through most of April. Anything else you want to mention?
Autism Speaks Walk, Saturday, April 28th at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena.
Huge
I'm
event.
going to be at that and being on the local chapter of the board. It's one of their big events of the year. So mark your calendar for April 28th, Saturday, Rose Bowl.
Wonderful. Tom, I just want to thank you for being you and for all the things that you've done, and for being a role model for our kids, especially our young men. I love to have people that I can point to to my son and say, you know, here's somebody who's successful and is out there and doing things, and you are always you're a gentleman. And that is rare in these days. And the fact that you are a gentleman and well-spoken and speaking out for all of our community is, I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you.
And I really want to thank you for having me. And on the note of becoming who I am today, and for people with autism that are listening, I want to encourage you, as I did, to take help, or at least consider help that is offered to you. I know you want to not hear it, or you might think, I'm not feeling it. At least hear the other person out. You may be surprised as to what progress can give you. For instance, I wanted to have a girlfriend. My mother enrolled me in social skills classes. I didn't want to take social skills classes, but she reminded me, you want to have a girlfriend, don't you? I said, yeah. So I understood why I was getting the help I need. So when you understand that your parents, your teachers, your therapists are not there to change you, they want to help you live the life that you want. So listen to what they have to say and make an educated and informed decision before you start saying no.
Love that. Great note to end on, and I want to tell people again your website.
Thomas Island, I-L-A-N-D.
No S.
No S.
Except the one in Thomas.
Yes.
ThomasIsland.com. One S
Thomas
only. There we go.
Island.
And it's on the screen for you guys. We're totally out of time. We are going to be back next Wednesday, but I want to remind everybody the next 2 weeks we're only having live shows on Wednesday. But I do want to say that coming up on World Autism Awareness Day, which is a Monday, we're not usually live that day, we're going to have a big special show, big special guests. We already know that we're having Anita Lesko and Dr. Temple Grandin on live with us on that day, so you're not going to want to miss that. Mark it in your calendar, that we will be here doing a live show on World Autism Awareness Day. But we will be back next Wednesday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.